President Bola Tinubu delivered his first Democracy Day speech since assumption of office with glowing tributes to the winner of the June 12 presidential election, the late MKO Abiola. Well, in his broadcast to the country to commemorate Democracy Day, the president urged leaders to use lessons learned from the annulled historic election to develop the country. Let's share some parts of the speech with you.
We celebrate a day that has remained a watershed in our nation's history, not just today, but for every June 12th, for the endless future that our beloved country shall exist and work stronger and stronger. Generation of Nigerians will always remember themselves that the democracy that is steadily going to become the defining essence of our polity was not gifted to us on a silver platter. We can easily recall the sacrifice and the martyrdom of Chief MKO Abiola, the custodian of the sacred mandate that was so cruelly annulled. He sacrificed his life in unyielding patriotic defense of the ideals of democracy, as symbolized in his choice by his fellow countrymen and women as their duly elected president. We remember Pat Al-Fedrewani, one of the heroes of our independence struggle, and Major General Shehu Musaya Adua, retired, who was silenced by the military junta while in pursuit of democracy. They gave their yesterday for the liberty that is ours today. The point is that we must never take this democracy for granted. On May 29, I gave effect to the decision taken by my predecessor in office to remove the fuel subsidy, the albatross, and free up the collective use of much needed resources, which had hitherto been pocketed by a few rich. I admit the decision will impose extra burden on the masses of our people. I feel your pain. This is one decision we must bear to save our country from going under and take our resources away from the stranglehold of a few unpatriotic elements. For your trust and belief in us, I assure you that your sacrifice shall not be in vain. Those of us who have been privileged to elect into public office at various levels in both the executive and legislative arms of government must recommit ourselves to offering selfless service to the people.
That was President Bola Tinubu broadcast Democracy Day speech earlier today. Now, Babajide, let's look at the speech given earlier today by President Bola Tinubu. He mentioned MKO Abiola as a symbol of June 12 and, of course, his sacrifices for democracy. But let's talk about how did Abiola's unwavering commitment now to democracy inspire this pro-democracy movement and perhaps contributed to Nigeria's steady growth in democracy?
As you know, many people didn't expect Abiola to pursue his mandate as much as he did. One, he was a favorite of the military. His best friends were in the military, and they thought, look, Abiola would simply give up the struggle once it became clear that we would not give it to him. But there's a level to which a struggle gets to, that the ownership of that struggle completely taken off you. You are just the symbol of the struggle, but you don't own it anymore.
Right.
So people prevailed on him that, look, you can't sit here and be expecting these people to give you back your power. Some people thought that when Abacha took over and fired Shoneko as interim national government head, that he will hand over to MKO. But the man had other ideas. He too wanted to be president. In fact, it became extremely hostile. And when MKO was prevailed upon to declare himself president, having won an election, the next step they took was to haul him into detention. And while in detention, they piled pressure on him to give up that mandate, give up that struggle. He said no. Because having lost his freedom, he made up his mind that, look, this struggle, I will not compromise. He became another Mandela. You know, Mandela was offered freedom on the platter of gold so many times, and Mandela just told himself, no, I would offend so many people out there. Yes, I'm in prison, but I will offend people if I decided that I was no longer interested, because that struggle had become bigger than him. So Abiola refused to yield, and in the end, he died in detention. That energized his base. The pro-democracy groups then made up their minds that, look, those who robbed us of the mandate we gave this man, we will not let them have peace. And then in the media, in civil society, the agitation became stronger. It could no longer be silenced. People lost their lives, journalists lost their lives, but the struggle became more and more intense. And after Abacha died, General Abdul Salami, who took over, reeled out his program for handover to the civilian administration, which his predecessors didn't think of doing, which made it clear to us that Abacha had no plan to really hand over. So in the end, democracy came. So the credit for the democracy that we enjoy today goes to Asiwaju, because if he had given up at that time easily.
You mean Abiola?
Abiola, sorry, I don't know why.
Maybe the AA.
They look similar in some ways, you know, 1993, 2003, you know, 2023. You know, so these things was making me confuse them. So if he had given up at that time, it would have been a succession of military regime, the way they were doing. Just hand over. This one does his own hands over to another person. So we must give credit to him for standing firm. Many people never believed Abiola could suddenly become a different animal.
Right.
You know, but that was what he became, and he fought and fought. He lost his life, but he gave himself immortality. No one will forget the role that he played. And President Buhari has to also take a lot of credit, because the leaders before him, including Obasanjo, who was a major beneficiary of June 12th, never thought of immortalizing Abiola. Talk less of even naming June 12th a Democracy Day.
Let me hold your thoughts on this, because we need to go on a very quick break. I'm sure you have more to say on this very issue. When we come back, we'll have more on this very topic. Just stay with us. It's still on to Journalist Hangout, and we're discussing the June 12, 30 years of June 12 Democracy Day. And Babajide was giving his thoughts earlier on about the canonization of June 12, which was declared Democracy Day by former President Muhammadu Buhari. So, Babajide, you can continue.
We've got to give him credit.
Yeah.
Because what Obasanjo refused to do, despite pressure, Buhari came and did it. Jonathan, in one of his speeches, even described Abiola as presumed winner. That was a very nasty thing to say. He won the election hands down. The enemies of democracy were the ones who were calling Abiola presumed winner. And Jonathan opened his mouth and said presumed winner. Come on. But President Buhari means no words. He knew that this was the person who won the election, and he chose to honor him in death. Gave him the highest honor in our land.
The GCFR.
The honor that you give a president. And then named the stadium that Obasanjo built in Abuja after him. So whatever we say about President
former
Buhari,
president,
we must know that this June 12th that we are celebrating as Democracy Day, without President Buhari, it would not have happened. So we have to give him credit for what Abiola's brother from Ogun State refused to do. He took a man from Daura to do it and then calm all of the agitation that, look, this man, you need to honor him in death. He's done that. So as for me, I'm grateful for the role that
the former president played.
Yes.
Now let's look at this, Kolawole. Let's look at the president's speech, talking about President Tinubu describing or rather saying that democracy requires constant vigilance and protection. Now, how do you think he suggests this to Nigerians in terms of safeguarding democracy and, of course, ensuring its longevity so that we do not have it truncated, even in the face of challenges?
What are the indices that, or the things, the excuses that the military would always give when they intervene? You call it intervene, in democracy. It's either insecurity, poverty in the land, crises, and all of that. So for that to be a reality, for us to protect the democracy, it's a two-way race.
Right.
The leadership must also play its own role by ensuring developmental strides in the country, by ensuring that we end insecurity, by ensuring that we invest in infrastructure, by ensuring that we reduce poverty. In that way, you keep the military in the barracks. In addition to professionalizing the military, give them what they want so that they can be satisfied doing their job. 1, 2. On the part of the people too. That is why when a government does not want criticism, you ask, are they actually democratic? On the part of the people, we must hold the government accountable, regardless of where you voted, whether you voted for party A or B. The moment a man comes on board, it's no longer about the party, it's about the country, the destiny of the entire country. So we must hold the leadership accountable, not as a disruptor, not as one that wants to bring the government down, but by ensuring that we criticize, legitimately. We criticize with the patriotic act of one who wants development in the country. And I see that may be difficult at present because the country is so divided. So perhaps one place to start that from, by ensuring that we protect democracy, is by, uniting the nation. We are so divided. In the country today, we are largely, we largely promote indigenship and not citizenship. So the contestation between citizenship and indigenship is so large that a man from Enugu cannot become a governor in Ebonyi. I remember in 2019 when they told Bianca Ojukwu that no, you are not from Anambra, despite marrying to the place, even by law, from there. They said, you're not from here, you can't become a senator. You saw what happened in Lagos in the last election. So the country is so divided that.
They did it to your governor's wife too.
Anyway. Okay, let me keep quiet. No, of course, she went to contest. Anyway, let me not, delve to her. So basically, I'm saying that for us to keep this democracy, we must do some basic things. I've mentioned some. But uniting the nation is about something we must do, even though it is very difficult because of our peculiarity. Nigeria, see, when I hear some people comparing us to the UK, no, you can become, they don't understand our peculiarity here. In 1960, there was no plebiscite to ask the members of the union if they want to be part of this union. It was done only in southern Cameroon, and they opted out of the union. And so we came together not because we wanted to, but because the colonial masters felt it was okay for them. So right now, people see, one of the major consequences of that is that Nigerians, is this manifest reality of Nigerians owing allegiance, loyalty first to their tribe before the nation. So you don't have a Nigerian per se. We see ourselves first from where we come from. So we must find a way to unite us. That is why I may be advocating for the government to please set, revive the National Orientation Agency, fund the place, make it work, so that they can do the proper work of, reorientation again to get this nation united. That we need, because one, regardless of the policy coming, if a man does not believe in you because you are known from him, he may not really accept it. Look at what is happening in the National Assembly. The RAY is talking, the Northern Caucus is talking that it must come from them. Not necessarily because they don't know that they need to at least satisfy the diversity of the country, but because of this interest, the tribe, where I come from. So that we must work to ensure that that is protected. Then lastly, we must also ensure that we promote democratic ideals. Elections must be free and fair. In that, we will reduce the chances of, complaint after the election, and that is maybe we'll be, closing to protecting this democracy.
Indeed. Now, I understand we have our guest who joins me now via Zoom for more discussions on 30 years of June 12 and Nigeria's political future, and he is Professor of Political Institutions and Comparative Politics at the Usmanu Danfodio University, Sokoto. Professor Yahaya Tanko Baba, good to have you on the program this evening. So before we get on to much more issues, let's talk about the June 12 now. What are the potential long-term implications now of recognizing June 12 as a democracy day for Nigeria's political future and, of course, the democratic institutions? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the June 12 is a date memorial to Nigeria and Nigerians. And I think it's a turning point in Nigeria's political and democratic history. I mean, that was a moment in which the military government tested the resolve of Nigerian people about democracy, and the people reacted swiftly. The agitations, the riots, the shutdowns, the eruption of mass protests against the military, the decision of the military government to annul the June 12 election that was deemed to be conducted freely and fairly, and of course, presumed to be won by the late Chief MKO Abiola, was greeted with mass protest. And that was the moment in which the transitions without end of the then military ruler, Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, came to an abrupt end. Of course, yes, this did united the Nigerian people against the military government and against military rule and in favor of democracy. It's quite a huge stride, for the government and the state of Nigeria to recognize this very particular day as Democracy Day. Remember, this was just a switch and a change of a date from 29th of May to June 12. It was just a departure from the military-imposed legacies and to a more civil, more democratic, more historic, moments that Nigerian people can reflect on to say that truly this is a moment we can reflect on democracy. This is a moment we can reflect on Democrats. This is a moment we can reflect on sacrifices made by people. These are moments that we can actually reflect on those trajectories that actually led to this so much valued, preferred framework of governance called democracy that was achieved. There was no, of course, you cannot delink what has happened in June 12 election or June 12, 1993 with the return of democracy in 1999. And of course, even though much later, the nation was polarized as to the agitations and the struggle to actualize June 12 election. But again, the momentum against the military government was sustained and across the country's divide. People thought that NADECO, the National Democratic Coalition, was the only front I mean, that actually worked apparently against the military junta of Sani Abacha. Not at all. There are quite a number of forces across the country that operated in quite different fashion to tell the military to actually leave the political scene and return the country to democracy. So I think this is a memorable day. This is a decision that is a wise one. This is a decision by the former government to actually bring forth to the Nigerian people reflection about values, about ideals, about even the sacrifices people made to get this democratic government as a framework of governance. So it's quite memorable, it's historic, it's iconic, and we are going to live with this very particular memory, and this memory should teach us lessons about sacrifices, lessons about conducting the affairs of government when constituted in line with democratic principles and so on and so forth.
Prof, you are a professor of political, with expertise in political institutions. What can we do to strengthen our political institutions as a way of strengthening democracy in the final analysis?
Yeah, I think institutions make democracy. Institutions make a political system. And institutions evolve over time. They grow, they decay, and they revive. And the institutions are built through what? Adherence, tenacious and strict adherence to rules, regulations, conventions, and traditions that makes them. And our struggle with democracy in Nigeria today has always been that our institutions are weak to take decisions. And whenever they take decisions, these institutions are also not memorable in making sure that such decisions have direct and decisive impact on the general well-being of the people. We haven't built our institutions at the party level. We are still struggling with our institution at the level of the legislature. The executive is also still, of course, not matured enough in terms of conception, formulation and implementation of policies that ought to have been translated from party manifestos and campaign promises. We have the judiciary also at the revived institution of democratic governance that is still struggling for its autonomy and independence, and of course, entrenching fairness, justice, equity between and amongst individual groups and organizations. So I think what needs to be done is for these institutions to allow to grow in accordance with the rules, regulations, conventions, practices, and norms that establish them. And if we do that, we are entrenching and deepening these institutions to de-emphasize the significance of personalities. In Nigeria's democracy today, personalities are more important than institutions. And that explains why we are struggling with democracy. We are struggling to entrench the rule of law. We are struggling to entrench accountability and transparency, probity in the management of people's affairs. We are struggling to guarantee even press freedom. We are struggling to even build civil society organizations which are vanguard of the people in between elections. So all of these institutions combine to actually strengthen democratic governance. But when personalities now ride over and above organizations that ought to be institutions, then we are in for it.
Right.
And that the dividends of democracy will actually have to come by.
Indeed. But let me quickly ask you this question now. What are the prospects for Nigeria's political future? Looking at the factors you've also raised, and what are the factors we can use to determine the democratic consolidation here to ensure that we rise above the odds and, of course, improve socio-economic development? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think elite consensus is key to achieving that. Elite across divides. When I say elites, I mean political elites across divide, across party divide, across regional divides, across ethnic, tribal divides need to build consensus among the Nigerian elites about the Nigerian project, regardless of whatever divide or whatever leaning, whatever platform you belong to. This is key to nation building. This is also key to democratic deepening. Then secondly, and most importantly, the institutions of governance, particularly parties that are so central to democratic process, must be built around ideological leanings And that is why today we are struggling with governance at level, at subnational level, and at national level. Because even when these parties were conceived from 30 ideological lineages, these ideas are hardly translated into governmental policies, into governmental programs, and into governmental projects. There seems to be no synergy between claims made by institutions such as parties with the conduct of government whenever they are constituted. So we compare notes between and among different parties that actually control government at subnational level, at a central level. You cannot decipher between and among parties that control this government and the programs they implement, and the promises and the manifestos and the campaign promises they make, and the output they actually, at the end of the day, deliver to the Nigerian people. But of course, when you talk about the Nigerian state, you talk about a very complex state that needs lots of thought on how to reorganize it. I mean, structurally, if you like, with laws, various kind of laws repealed, with institutions of governance actually reinvented, with structures of governance and organizations also restructured, and so on and so forth, to deliver the goods. The state is actually expected to deliver to general people. So institutions are key, and their development, their growth and development is central to democratic deepening and democratic broadening. And lack of institutionalization is the key to democratic reversal and democratic drawbacks.
All right, let's hold your thoughts now. We need to go on a very quick break. You're still on to Journalists Hangout. We'll have more discussions on this very issue when we return. So just stay with us. Welcome back. You're still on to Journalists Hangout, and I still have our guest joining us via Zoom, giving us his perspective on 30 years of June 12 and Nigeria's political future. So, Professor Tanko, let's talk about President Bola Tinubu's speech earlier on today, where he mentioned the contestation of elections as evidence for a vibrant democracy. Now, in your opinion, how does electoral competition now help to strengthen democratic institutions? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the electoral competition is a hallmark of democracy. The whole idea of democracy is about competitiveness of it, particularly in terms of elections. And of course, just like he said in his speech, the last presidential election was one most keenly contested, with three leading presidential aspirants closing gap on one another. And that shows the maturity of democracy, that shows the broadness of the choices available to the people, that shows also the engagement of the citizenry in electioneering campaign and in taking decision as to which of this platform, which of this party, which of these candidates is most preferred to them. You have instances where the whole nation and the whole public and citizenry becoming well mobilized, well charged, and actively engaged in this process of electioneering campaigning, in the discourse that actually trails it, in culminating even to the point of making choice and so on and so forth. And even after the elections, we have had instances to say that really Nigeria's democracy and electoral politics has come of age. We haven't had instances of election violence, post-election violence. We have had instances where the elites, fairly conducted themselves well. Their followers and supporters across the divide also conducted themselves with the maturity. Democrats are supposed to conduct themselves. And of course, even after declaration of result, of course, there are rejection of these results naturally from those who lost. But of course, the last option, which has been an institutional framework of seeking for redress, the tribunals, have actually opened discussion, and Nigerians are watching keenly the proceedings of this election tribunal, meaning that Nigerians have come to accept the culture of democratic contestation and competition in election, and that the era of violent confrontation and violent reaction during and after elections are almost gone, and that people are ready to accept the verdict of elections, and then, of course, move ahead and allow other institutions of government, like judiciary, to determine at the tail end of their proceedings what the outcome of the elections are. So I think it's a very good, development for Nigeria's democracy. And the 2023 elections, just like the 2019 elections, were improvements of the previous elections in terms of deployment of technology, in terms of control system, in terms of quality control, and in terms of limiting the extent to which the process itself is manipulated. But of course, you cannot have perfect election. Absolutely, we cannot have perfect elections. But as we experience challenges within our electoral system and our electoral processes, we also make amends and improve on the previous practices. Remember, this improvement in this electoral reform started in 2011. I mean, with 2011 elections, we made better use of it in 2015 elections. At that point, we had a turning point in Nigeria's democratic and electoral politics where an opposition, a coalition of opposition party actually defeated a ruling party. And then, of course, at that point, we said we really have come of age. And subsequently, improvements have been made, and people are coming to the understanding that
quickly,
elections are
Prof.
only to be won. Yeah.
Quickly, Prof, what's your attitude to vote buying? Even as our electoral process becomes more and more sophisticated, vote buying is becoming a big problem.
Yeah, I think this is a fallout of the previous reforms and reforms that were carried out by the electoral institution. It has now become quite difficult for other forms of manipulations to be carried out in our electoral process. And the only window now to manipulate and influence electoral outcomes is to vote, to buy votes of electorate. And this is a huge blow on Nigeria's electoral system and its democracy as well. And that has actually led to the excessive monetization of Nigeria's electoral system, which is also a burden on democracy and which will also affect the quality of democratic governance we are expected to get after elections. So now I think there is need for further electoral reforms to be carried out, or for the current electoral reforms to be strengthened to ensure that the issue of vote buying is given the deserved legal and constitutional attention, and that institutions should be strengthened to actually check these excesses and ensure that politicians and electorate who conduct themselves in the manner in which votes are bought and sold are actually treated as people who are disobedient to existing electoral laws.
All right, and that's
they
a
should be
fine
punished.
place to leave it, Professor Tanko. We appreciate your insights on the program, journalist Hangout. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Babajide, let's quickly wrap up this show now with you. Now, what lessons do you think Nigeria can learn from the June 12th experience to enhance its democratic process?
Yes, we have to come together as a people, because on June 12th, we voted without
across all divides,
brushing aside ethnicity, brushing aside religion. We voted overwhelmingly for an individual, not caring about his religion and religion of his deputy. You know, as Nigerians will say, it's vice. That's not good English. We voted for him and his deputy without caring about their religion. We were hopeful that he would deliver. Unfortunately, the military truncated that dream. Hopefully, in future, we will continue, Nigeria will continue to get the right leadership, and choices of the electorate would not be determined by where the individual came from, but the capacity of the individual to deliver the dividends of democracy.
Right. Olawole, final takes on this.
Well, it will be on the speech of Mr. President. He said the poor, should please sacrifice some more. We agree. But the government must also sacrifice. The president said, let the poor breathe. I think it will be a good place to wrap up to say, Mr. President, please let the poor breathe by reducing the cost of governance. We can't afford the cost that today, pervades the entire, governance structure in Nigeria. We must reduce the cost of governance. That is when Nigeria will know that truly, if you ask us to sacrifice again, of course, we'll be, be very ready to sacrifice when you do that first. Right. So it should please lead us in that, approach to sacrifice by ensuring that we reduce the cost of governance.
Indeed, and that's a fine place to leave it, gentlemen. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank my guests who joined us via Zoom, Professor Yahaya Tanko Baba, all the way from Sokoto, and also I'll thank my guests here in the studio, Babajide Kolade Otitoju, and Kolawole Johnson. It's a pleasure to have you all sharing your thoughts on the program this evening. And that's about it on Journalist Hangout. Join us again tomorrow for another episode of the program. You can also watch a repeat broadcast of it tonight at 11. Join us again on Sunday from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. We are also on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC News Nigeria. I am Esther Mokwariola. Bye for now, and God bless Nigeria.